The betrayal. The night was quiet, but in her heart there was no peace. She was an alien girl, young and innocent, and her family had always told her that she was their most precious child. She trusted them, she believed in their love, and she thought they would protect her forever. But behind their words, there was a secret, a cruel decision made in shadows. Her people lived in a world where weakness was not forgiven. Poverty had spread through their village, debts had grown, and powerful merchants demanded payment. The family had no courage to face them, no strength to fight them. They looked at their daughter, and in their fear, they chose betrayal. She never expected it. She thought she was safe with them. She smiled at her mother, hugged her younger brother, and closed her eyes to sleep. But in the middle of the night, she woke up with rough hands pulling her out of bed. Her wrists were tied, her voice was silenced, and her father's face looked away, ashamed. "Why?" her eyes asked, but no one answered. They pushed her into a transport cage. The engines roared, and the stars above looked cold. She cried out for help, but her cries were swallowed by the night. The journey felt endless. Metal walls closed around her. Strangers watched her like a piece of property, not a living being. She was not a daughter anymore. She was not family anymore. She was nothing but merchandise. At dawn, the transport reached a massive alien city, a place of noise, fire, and greed. Tall spires touched the sky, but beneath them were cages filled with the broken, the forgotten, and the sold, the slave market. Chains were locked around her wrists and ankles. Her clothes were torn. Her dignity was stolen. She stood among others who had been betrayed, abandoned, and captured. Some cried, some stared blankly, and some whispered prayers that no one could hear. The auction began. Voices shouted prices. Merchants laughed as if buying lives was only a game. A cruel voice described her beauty, her strength, her value. The crowd cheered. The girl's heart sank. She looked for a familiar face, hoping her family would return and stop this, but they never came. They had sold her, and they would never return. Every beat of the drum that announced the next bid sounded like the strike of a hammer on her soul. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to fall on her knees. She stood, even in chains, with dignity. The slavers laughed. "Look at her. She thinks she is proud," they said, "but she will be broken soon." As the crowd grew louder, a shadow moved at the edge of the market, a figure that did not belong here. He was different, not one of them. His skin was human. His eyes were human. He looked at the girl not as a product, but as a person. He felt the cruelty of the scene burn inside him. The girl's pain echoed in his chest. He had seen suffering before, but something about this moment made him unable to turn away. She raised her head. Her eyes, filled with sorrow, met his. It was only for a heartbeat, but in that moment, something changed. She saw not a buyer, not another cruel stranger, but a spark of hope. The human clenched his fists. He knew this world was not safe for him. He knew that to interfere was to invite death. But as he looked at her, chained and betrayed, he realized he could not leave her to this fate. Her heart beat faster. She did not know who he was. She did not know his strength or his past, but she felt it. He was not like the others. The auctioneer shouted louder. "Who will bid more? Who will take this one?" The crowd laughed. The slavers jeered. The girl closed her eyes, preparing for the end of her freedom. Then she heard a voice, steady and calm, breaking through the noise. It was the voice of the human. "I will take her," he said. The market fell silent. All eyes turned to him. A human daring to speak in the hall of slavers. A human daring to challenge their claim. The girl opened her eyes, her chains still heavy, her body still weak. But for the first time since her family's betrayal, she felt something new. She felt hope. And in that moment, as the slavers growled and the crowd whispered, the story of betrayal began to twist into something far greater, for in the darkest market of chains, a human had chosen to risk everything. The human stranger. The human man had come to this alien world for trade, not for war. His ship was small, his resources limited, and he had promised himself to stay quiet, blend in, and avoid attention. In these markets, humans were rare, treated as weak outsiders, and he knew one mistake could cost him his life. Yet, as he walked past the crowded slave arena, something inside him froze. He had seen cruelty before, but this sight was different. On the raised platform stood a young alien girl, chained, bruised, and trembling. Her eyes were proud, yet filled with grief. She looked like someone who had lost everything and yet refused to bow. He told himself to move on. His mind said, "Do not interfere, stay alive." But his heart burned. He remembered another time, another face, someone he could not save. That memory cut through him like a blade. The auctioneer shouted numbers. The crowd roared with laughter. Merchants argued about her price. But when she lifted her head, their eyes met. For a brief second, he saw a silent plea, not spoken with words but carried in her gaze. He felt something shift inside. That look was enough. He could not leave her here. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the crowd. His presence drew whispers. A human? What is he doing here? Some muttered, others laughed. Does he think he belongs among us? The slaver's voice boomed again. Who will pay more for this one? She is strong. She is young. She is worth every coin. The human clenched his fists. His mind screamed against the danger. But his voice broke through the silence, calm and firm. I will take her. The entire arena froze. Heads turned. Mouths opened. The crowd stared at him in shock. A human daring to bid. Daring to stand against slavers. It was madness. The auctioneer narrowed his eyes. You dare, he growled. Humans have no claim here. Go back to your pitiful world before you are crushed. But the human did not step back. His eyes stayed locked on the girl. He saw the chains, the fear, and the hidden strength in her. She had been betrayed, yet she had not broken, and he would not let her break now. The merchants jeered. He cannot pay. He is nothing. Throw him out. Another shouted. Teach the human his place. The slavers reached for their weapons, ready to silence him. But the human raised his hand again, his voice louder this time. I will take her, and I will pay whatever price you demand. The girl's breath caught. Her heart raced. She had thought no one would ever stand for her. And yet this stranger, a human, was defying them all. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some laughed, some shouted, some demanded blood. The slavers stepped closer, towering over him, sneering. Do you know what you are asking for, human? Do you know what happens to those who defy us? He did not flinch. I know, he said quietly, but I also know what happens if I walk away. The girl's eyes widened. She saw something in him, not madness, not foolish pride, but a fire she had never seen before. The auctioneer snarled. Fine, pay the price. Prove you are not wasting our time. His hand slammed on the table. Numbers flashed on the screens above. The cost was enormous, impossible for an ordinary traveler. The human's chest tightened. He had barely enough credits for fuel. But he also had something else, his courage and his willingness to risk everything. He reached into his pack, pulled out his trade tokens, his savings, his last chance at survival, and threw them onto the table. The crowd gasped. The slaver inspected them, growled, and finally nodded. Very well, human, she is yours. For a heartbeat, silence filled the arena. Then the crowd burst into angry shouts. Some demanded the sale be canceled. Others called for the human's death. The girl's chains were unlocked. Her body shook, not from fear, but from shock. She stumbled forward, and for the first time, someone caught her. Not to hurt, not to chain, but to hold. The human looked down at her and whispered, You are safe now. But even as he said it, alarms rang across the market. The slavers had no intention of letting a human walk away with their prize. Guards poured in, weapons raised. The crowd surged forward, hungry for blood. The girl's eyes widened in terror, but the human only tightened his grip on her hand. Run, he said, and together they leapt into the chaos. The dangerous escape. The alarm screamed across the market. Red lights flashed, and the sound of armored boots thundered on metal floors. The human grabbed the alien girl's hand, pulling her through the crowd as shouts and curses echoed all around. The slavers roared in anger. Catch them. Do not let the human leave alive. Guards rushed forward, armed with shock spears and rifles. Their glowing weapons cut through the smoke-filled air. The girl stumbled, her legs weak from chains, but the human pulled her close. Stay with me, he whispered. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. They slipped into a narrow passage, shadows covering them for a moment. The crowd's noise grew distant, but only for a heartbeat. Drones flew overhead, scanning the streets, beams of blue light sweeping across walls and faces. The city outside was massive and alive. Neon lights glowed on every building. Alien signs flashed across towers, and the air was thick with voices and smoke. But now it was no longer just a city. It was a hunting ground, and they were the prey. The girl's heart pounded. "Why are you doing this?" she asked breathlessly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes searched his face. She could not understand. No one had ever risked so much for her, not even her own family. The human's jaw tightened. He did not look at her, only at the path ahead. "Because no one else will," he answered. The words sank into her soul. They were simple, yet powerful. He did not know her, yet he chose to protect her. He was human, and yet he carried more honor than those who had once called her blood. Behind them, the guards shouted orders. Their boots pounded closer. The human shoved open a gate and led her into the lower levels of the city. The air was colder here, darker, filled with rusting pipes and dripping water. The girl clung to him, her breath shallow. "They will not stop," she whispered. "I know," he replied. His eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, searching for a way out. The sound of buzzing grew louder. A swarm of drones turned into the alley, their red eyes glowing like fire. The human pushed her behind a broken wall. "Stay down," he said. He picked up a loose metal pipe from the ground. His grip was steady. The drones spotted him, red beams locking onto his chest. Energy crackled in the air. In seconds, they fired. Blinding light flashed, but the human rolled aside, the blast striking the wall behind him. He leapt forward, swinging the pipe with all his strength. The metal cracked against the drone's sensor. Sparks exploded. The machine fell, broken. Another drone dived, firing again. The human ducked, grabbed the wrecked machine, and used it as a shield. Energy bolts slammed into it, the smell of burning metal filling the air. The girl's eyes widened. She had never seen anyone fight like this. His body was battered, his face scarred, but he moved with a will that could not be broken. He crushed the second drone, then grabbed her hand again. "We move now." They ran deeper into the Undercity. The walls shook with alarms. Voices echoed from every direction. "Seal the gates. Capture the human." The human pulled her into an abandoned tunnel. Rust covered the walls. Old machinery hummed faintly. It smelled of oil and decay, but it was shelter. They stopped for a moment, both breathing hard. The girl leaned against the wall, her body trembling. She looked at him. "You will die for me," she said. Her voice was not a question, but a broken truth. He turned to her, his face hard but his eyes gentle. "If I must, I will," he answered. She could not speak. Her chest ached. For the first time since her betrayal, she felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. But their silence did not last. Heavy footsteps echoed in the tunnel. The glow of weapons lit the walls. The slavers had found them again. The human clenched his jaw. "Stay behind me," he said. The girl shook her head. Something inside her changed. She had been chained, betrayed, sold, and discarded. But here was someone fighting for her life. For the first time, she felt the strength to fight too. The footsteps grew louder. Shadows stretched across the walls. The enemy was near. The human gripped his pipe. The girl lifted her hands, ready to defend herself however she could. Together, in that dark tunnel, hunted and cornered, they made a choice. They would not run anymore. They would fight. And as the enemy drew closer, the air grew thick with tension. The girl whispered one word, almost like a vow: "Together." The human nodded once, his voice steady. "Together." The darkness shook as the battle began. The chase across worlds. The tunnel shook with the force of weapons. Sparks rained from broken wires, and the walls echoed with the angry voices of slavers. The human pulled the girl close, his arm around her shoulder. "We cannot stay here," he whispered. His voice was calm, but his breath was heavy. They ran through the dark tunnels, water splashing under their feet. The air smelled of oil and rust. Above them the city roared like a beast, its towers alive with lights, alarms, and hunters. At every turn, guards appeared. Their glowing rifles filled the shadows with deadly light. The human fought them with scraps of metal, stolen knives, and pure will. The girl stayed close, her eyes wide with fear and awe. She had never seen such determination. When they reached the surface again, the city was burning with noise. Giant screens flashed their faces. Wanted posters glowed on every wall. Human criminal. The words burned across the sky. Traitor slave. Her image beside his. The crowd parted wherever they ran. Some cursed them, some shouted warnings, and some only watched with cold eyes. The human tightened his grip on her hand. "Do not stop," he said. The girl's chest ached, but she nodded. Her heart was torn between terror and wonder. She could not understand why this man risked everything, but his courage gave her strength. At the edge of the city, the massive hangar gates loomed. Ships came and went like metal birds, carrying merchants, soldiers, and wanderers to the stars. The human's eyes locked on one old cargo vessel, rusted but still breathing steam. "That one," he said, pulling her forward. But the slavers were already there, blocking the path. Their captain, a tall alien with iron-gray skin, sneered at them. His voice cut through the noise. "You cannot run. Human, you think one act of foolish bravery changes the order of this galaxy? You think you can steal from us?" The human stood tall, his chest rising and falling. He held no weapon, only his will. "She is not yours," he said, his voice steady, "and she never will be again." The girl's eyes filled with tears. Her chains had been cut, but her heart still carried the weight of betrayal. Hearing those words made the weight lighter. The slaver captain laughed. "Then you will die together." His soldiers raised their rifles. The human grabbed the girl's hand. "Run," he whispered again. They dashed forward, weapons firing behind them. Bolts of fire lit the ground. Smoke filled the air. The girl screamed, but the human shielded her, his body pushing through the chaos. They leapt into the cargo ship, alarms blaring. The human slammed the hatch shut. Lights flickered. The engines roared awake. The old vessel shook like a dying beast, but it was alive. "Can it fly?" the girl whispered, clutching his arm. "It has to," he answered, pressing the controls. His hands moved fast, guiding the ship through the hangar as blasts struck its sides. The city guard shouted, their ships rising into the sky to chase them. The human gritted his teeth. The vessel lurched forward, bursting out into the night sky. Stars stretched above like cold fire. The girl pressed her hands against the window, watching the city grow smaller. Her heart raced. She was leaving the place of her betrayal, but she was not free yet. Behind them, enemy ships swarmed like vultures. Their engines screamed, weapons glowing. The human pushed the vessel harder, sparks flying from its controls. "Hold on," he told her. The ship shook violently as blasts struck its hull. The girl cried out, gripping the seat. Fear clawed at her chest. But then she looked at him. His face was hard, his eyes focused. He was not running for himself. He was running for her. Her fear turned into something else, a burning fire she had never felt before. For the first time in her life, she wanted to fight, not to surrender. The human glanced at her. He saw it too. The change in her eyes. She was no longer only a victim, no longer just betrayed. She was becoming something stronger. Enemy ships closed in. The human slammed a switch. The old vessel's hidden cannons came to life. The girl gasped as bright fire lit the sky. The human fired back, explosions rocking the void. The chase tore across the stars, worlds glowing below. Every blast, every shake of the ship felt like the end, yet they pushed forward. The girl gripped his arm, her voice steady now. "We will make it," she whispered. He looked at her, and for the first time since the market, he smiled. "Yes, we will," he answered. And as the stars swallowed them, leaving the burning city behind, their journey truly began, not as a master and a slave, not as strangers, but as two souls bound by defiance and hope. Secrets in the void. The ship drifted through the endless dark. Its engines groaned. Sparks hissed from broken panels, and smoke coiled from the walls. The girl sat in silence, her hands trembling, the weight of chains still heavy in her memory. The human moved quickly through the cockpit, pressing switches, patching wires, and guiding the wounded vessel through the void. His face was pale, sweat glistened on his forehead, but his eyes never wavered. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of the engine was the only voice. Outside, the stars stretched like frozen fire. Behind them, enemy signals blinked faintly on the radar, distant but still hunting. At last, The girl whispered, "Why?" Her voice broke the silence like a fragile glass. "Why risk your life for me? You do not know me. You had no reason." The human paused. His hands stopped moving. For a moment, he did not answer. He only stared at the stars ahead. His chest rose and fell with a heavy sigh. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "Because once I did nothing, and someone I loved paid the price." The girl's breath caught. She turned to him. His face was hard, but there was sorrow buried deep. "Who?" she asked softly. He closed his eyes. His hand tightened on the controls. "My sister," he whispered. "She was taken, enslaved, and I was too far, too weak, too slow. I swore it would not happen again, not if I could stop it." The girl's eyes filled with tears. Her chest ached with his words. She had been betrayed by her own family. Yet here was a stranger, a human, who carried pain for her as if it were his own. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. "You could have left me in that market." He turned his head and looked at her, his gaze steady. "I will never walk away again." The silence between them shifted, no longer heavy with fear, but with something stronger. A fragile bond was forming, forged not in safety, but in fire and loss. But before the moment could rest, the radar beeped sharply. Enemy signals flared brighter, closer. The girl gasped. "They are coming." The human leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "They planted a tracker," he said. His eyes scanned her wrist, the faint glow of alien metal still etched in her skin. Her heart raced. "The chains," she whispered. Her hands shook. "Even when they freed me, the poison of their control stayed." The human moved quickly, pulling out his knife. The blade gleamed faintly in the dim light. "Hold still," he said, his voice calm but firm. Fear flashed in her eyes, but she nodded. His hands were steady as he cut into the metal, sparks flying. The ship trembled under enemy fire in the distance, but he did not stop. At last, the shackle cracked, falling to the ground with a dull echo. The girl gasped, her skin burning, but the glow was gone. The signal was silent. He dropped the broken piece into a metal box, slamming it shut. "Now they will follow this, not us," he said, throwing the box into the cargo hold and locking it. The girl touched her wrist, tears slipping down her face. She felt lighter, freer, yet she still could not understand. "Why do you fight so hard for me?" she asked again, her voice trembling. The human's eyes met hers, steady as stone. "Because every life matters," he said, "and yours is worth more than they will ever know." Her heart throbbed. The words cut through the pain of betrayal. Her own family had sold her, but this stranger was giving everything to keep her alive. The ship shook violently. Enemy fire lit the void. The girl clutched the seat, fear flooding back, but the human's voice anchored her. "We are not finished yet." He pulled the ship into a sharp dive, stars spinning past them. Explosions flared behind. The enemy chased, merciless and relentless. The girl held her breath. Her fear turned into something else. Anger, fire, strength. She would not be a victim again. "Teach me," she said suddenly, her voice strong. "Teach me to fight. I will not be weak, not anymore." The human looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. Then he nodded once. "Together," he said. The ship roared into the darkness, hunted but unbroken. And in that moment, the seed of something greater was planted. Not only survival, but the beginning of a partnership that could change both their worlds. The final stand. The void outside was alive with fire. Enemy ships spread like a net, their glowing engines forming a wall across the stars. The human's vessel shook with every hit, metal groaning as if it would collapse. Sparks rained across the cockpit. Smoke stung their eyes, but still he held the controls. The girl clung to the seat, her heart pounding. Fear clawed at her, yet behind the fear burned something stronger, a flame that had awakened inside her since he freed her. She would not be a slave, not a victim, not anymore. The human glanced at her. His face was bruised, his hands burned, yet his eyes carried no fear. "This ends here," he said, his voice calm, steady. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, a black fortress in the void. Its weapons glowed brighter than the stars. Its captain's voice crackled through the comms, sharp and cruel. "Human, surrender now. Return the girl, and I may let you die quickly." The girl's fists clenched, Her chest ached with rage. "I will never go back," she whispered. The human's jaw tightened. He turned off the comms. His eyes stayed on the stars. "Then we fight." He pushed the vessel forward, the engines screaming. Enemy ships swarmed, firing beams of light that tore across the hull. The girl gasped as panels burst. "We cannot win," she said. The human shook his head. "We can, if we fight together." He reached under the seat, pulling out a second control panel, a system old and fragile, but still alive. He pushed it toward her. "Take it. I will guide. You fire." Her eyes widened. Her hands trembled. She had never held a weapon, never fought. I cannot." He looked at her, his voice soft but fierce. "Yes, you can. They broke your chains, but they did not break you. Trust yourself." The girl's breath shook, but she placed her hands on the panel. Lights flickered. Weapon systems came alive. The ship's old cannons glowed red. The human gave a sharp nod. "Now." She pressed the trigger. A blast of fire streaked through the void, striking one of the enemy ships. It exploded in a burst of light. The shockwave shook their vessel. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She had done it. The human smiled faintly. Again. The girl fired once more. Another ship falling. Sparks and fire filled the void. The hunters were no longer chasing helpless prey. They were fighting against defiance. But the enemy flagship loomed closer, its massive cannons charging. Power gathered like a storm. One strike would end everything. The human gripped the controls. "This ship cannot outrun them," he said quietly. "But maybe it can outsmart them." He pulled the vessel into a sharp dive. Weaving between wreckage and debris, the girl fired at every shadow. Her hands steady now. Her fear had turned into fire. The enemy flagship unleashed its blast. A wave of energy cut through space. The human jerked the controls. Their vessel spun, the beam barely missing, tearing a planet's ring apart behind them. The girl gasped. "That would have killed us." He nodded, sweat dripping. "Then do not miss your chance." They came closer to the flagship, closer than any sane pilot would dare. The enemy laughed over the comms. "You are flying to your own death." But the human only smiled, his eyes locked on the glowing core of the flagship's weapon. Not death. Victory. He turned to her. "Now, aim there." The girl's breath caught. Her finger hovered. Her heart thundered. She thought of her family who betrayed her, of the slavers who chained her, of every tear she shed in silence. She pressed the trigger. The cannon roared. The blast streaked forward, striking the core of the enemy weapon. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the flagship shook, fire bursting from its heart. Explosions tore through its hull. Lights swallowed the void. The girl shielded her eyes. The human held the controls steady as the wave passed. When the fire cleared, the flagship was gone, broken into pieces drifting in the dark. Silence filled the cockpit. The girl's hands trembled, but her eyes shone. We did it," she whispered. The human leaned back, his breath heavy. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "No, you did it." She turned to him, her eyes wet, her chest heavy with emotions she could not name. For the first time, she felt not betrayed, not broken, but strong. And as the stars stretched before them, no longer blocked by chains or hunters, she knew one truth. Together, they had won their freedom. Freedom and new bonds. The battlefield was silent now. The enemy flagship was gone, broken pieces floating like dark shadows across the stars. Smoke trailed behind their own ship, but it was still alive, still moving. The girl sat in her seat, her chest rising and falling. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of what she had done. She had fought. She had destroyed the weapon that chained her fate. She was not only freed by the human, she had freed herself. The human leaned back against the controls, his body tired, his voice rough. "We made it," he whispered. She looked at him, her eyes wet. "No," she said softly. "You made me believe I could fight. Without you, I would still be in chains." He shook his head, his lips curved into a faint smile. "Without you, I would still be running from the past. You gave me a reason to stand again." For a moment, silence wrapped them both. But it was not heavy like before. It was calm, gentle, like the stars watching over them. The ship limped toward a quiet moon, its silver surface glowing softly. They landed on a barren plain. the engines sighing into silence. The air was thin, but safe enough. They stepped out together, the ground crunching under their boots. The girl raised her head to the open sky, her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of release. For the first time, she breathed as a free soul. She turned to him, slowly sinking to her knees, her voice trembling. "I owe you everything. If you wish, I will serve you. You have every right." The human's face grew firm. He stepped closer and lifted her chin gently, his voice steady. "No, not as a servant, not as a slave. I did not fight for chains, I fought for your freedom." Her lips parted, her heart ached. She had expected another master, but instead she found something far greater. "Then what am I to you?" she asked, her voice a whisper. He looked at her, his eyes warm though his face carried scars. "You are not mine to own," he said softly. "But if you choose, you can walk beside me." Her chest swelled, her tears fell, but they were not the tears of betrayal anymore. They were tears of hope, of dignity returned. Slowly, she stood again, her voice stronger now. "Then I will stay with you, not because I must, but because I choose." The human nodded, his hand rested on hers. A silent promise passed between them, not of power, not of control, but of trust. Above them, the stars stretched endless and free. The galaxy was wide, filled with danger and cruelty, but also with hope. Together they would face it, not as master and slave, not as strangers, but as allies. The girl turned to the horizon, her voice steady. "I was betrayed by my blood, but I found my family in you." The human's eyes softened, his voice low but clear. "And I found my redemption in you." They stood side by side, their silhouettes glowing under the silver light. In the silence of that moon, a new story began, a story of freedom, courage, and bonds stronger than chains. And though the galaxy would remember her as a slave, and him as a foolish human who defied the slavers, they would remember themselves as something far greater. Two souls who chose each other when no one else would.